Well, hello everyone. My name is Monse Coria. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm on camera for my introduction. So my visual description, I'm a Hispanic female in her mid-20s. I have my dark brown hair pulled back and a gray sweater on. And I am a team member at the school immunization team at the Oregon Immunization Program. And today I'm going to be covering the immunization rates here in Oregon, as well as the exemption rates and some things that providers are doing to help. So we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off by turning off my camera so I find it a little bit better quality. Oh, did I stop sharing?
No, I see your screen still.
Oh, you do? You do? Okay, making sure. So to begin, I first want to start by giving you a brief background of the Oregon immunization requirements here in Oregon for schools and children's facilities. So these immunization requirements help protect over 650,000 children against 11 vaccine preventable diseases. These same requirements also help build community immunity, and they help make sure that kids have an opportunity to be brought up on their vaccines at least once a year. And I also want to give you a timeline of the school immunization process throughout the school year. So at back to school time, which is usually early September or late August for some parts of the state, a newly entering child's record must show at least one dose of each school required vaccine. Then in the fall, this is when schools work with the families who are missing immunizations to give them the chance to get updated on their vaccines. So this is currently what schools are working on right now. It's still really early in the fall, but this is what they are ideally doing. And then moving on in spring and well, still winter, and the third Wednesday in February, this is the deadline of exclusion day. And this is the day by when all records must be updated with documentation of either vaccine or exemptions. And a very common question that we usually get is why is exclusion day all the way in February rather than at the beginning of the school year? And the answer to that is that we really want exclusion day to be a very last resort. So it's all the way in February so that schools have already had the opportunity to work with these families to update the vaccination records of their children and during the fall or winter. But if a child does happen to be excluded in February, they can come right back to school as soon as they update their records with the appropriate vaccines or if they submit adequate documentation for an exemption. And then in the spring, this is when we do our data collection. So all the data that we collect, we publish it and make sure that it gets to the correct people. And now we can dive a little bit into the details of the immunization rates here in Oregon. All right, so let's take a look. Here is the percent of kids complete for each required vaccine. The yellow is the children's facilities, which include preschools, child cares, and Head Starts. And the green is grades K through 12. So for each required vaccine, you'll see that the immunization rate is up at around 95%, which is quite high. So that's really good. But if you are interested and into looking at the specific rates across the state, feel free to visit our interactive dashboard where you can click by county or by vaccine, and it has historical data. So if you're interested in comparing previous years, it's something that you can totally do. And the dashboard is updated with the most recent data that we have, which is last year's school year, the 2023-2024 year. And now for exemption rates. So we can take a look at the rates here in Oregon. Again, here's a graph. This is the exemption rates for kids with one or more required vaccines. So the yellow is for the children's facilities and the green is for grades K through 12. So on the left, we see the medical exemptions, and these make up a very small fraction of kiddos. It's only around 0.1 to 0.2%. And on the right, we have the non-medical exemptions, which make up the majority of exemptions here in Oregon. And that's with 5.5% of kids in children's facilities and about 7.2 in grades K through 12. And this graph will help us look at the change of non-medical exemptions throughout time. So we can take a look. So this is the percent of kindergarteners with non-medical exemptions, and it starts in the 1980s. So we'll see that it hovers at around 1% throughout the 80s and 90s. But then we see an increase in the 2000s, and it reached a peak in 2014. But then we saw a decrease in 2015, which was the first year that a law went into effect which required education to file for a non-medical exemption. Then we saw an increase followed again by a decrease in 2021. And this was the first point of data collection since the start of the pandemic. So it was a pretty messy year for data collection. So that drop to 5.3% may have been due to those challenges with data collection. Then moving on to 2022, with more complete data, we were able to say that the non-medical exemption rates increased again to the pre-pandemic levels. And in 2023, we saw the rate increase to 8.1%. And finally, in 2024, it increased again to 8.8% of kindergarteners having a non-medical exemption to one or more of the required vaccines. But all of this is state level wide data that you're seeing, but all of our counties look different throughout the state. So we can take a look at the differences among them all as far as the exemption rates go. So there's another series of maps. So this one starts in 2000, 2001, and it shows the percent of kindergartners in each county with a non-medical exemption to one or more required vaccines. And the brighter the blue, that means the higher the exemption rate. So if you want to draw your attention to Wallowa County in the upper right-hand side of the map, it had the highest exemption rate that year, but it also has a very small population, like many rural counties do across the state. So you'll see these rates bounce up and down quite a bit, and that would be the explanation, the small population sizes. So I'm going to click through and we'll see the change throughout time. And this was the first year of the law that went into effect requiring the education for a non-medical exemption. So I'm going to go back 1 year and we'll see that there was that decrease that I was talking about after the law went into effect. In 2019 to 2020, this was the first the last pre-pandemic year. So then 2020, 2021 was the first year of the pandemic. So again, we can see that drop in the rate because of the data collection struggles. And then 2023, 2024, this was this past school year. So as you can see, exemption rates have increased throughout all areas in the state. So what is happening that is resulting in these higher exemption rates? We think we might be seeing a few things come together, not just a single factor. So more people may be choosing exemptions, but we also know that there has been lots of hesitancy around the COVID-19 vaccine, and this might be spilling over into school required vaccines. But we also know that there has been challenges accessing vaccines throughout the height of the pandemic and even now. So more children are just missing vaccines. But looking ahead, many partners are joining together to help maintain these high immunization rates in schools and children's facilities. And within our program, within the Oregon Immunization Program, we've launched an anonymous survey to gather information about all of these contributing factors that are leading families to file for non-medical exemptions. So the individuals that complete the Oregon non-medical exemption module also have the opportunity to take this optional survey after having already completed it and having received their certificate. And this survey has been up for almost a year now, and it has undergone one review cycle where some improvements were made. But we hope to continue gathering lots of good information to better understand the increase in non-medical exemptions that we have been seeing throughout the past few years. So this will give us a much better understanding. And now, what are some things that providers can do to help? So we know that kids are not fully caught up on vaccines that were missed during that pandemic. So one thing that you can do is to recall kids who are behind on vaccines. And Sam covered this towards the end of his presentation, using Alert as a tool for that. And another is to encourage vaccinations during the fall so that kids aren't even subject to exclusion in February when exclusion day comes around. So that's a really good thing to be doing right now is encouraging vaccination for kiddos that are behind and the ones that show up on your recall. So right now is a really great time for that. And another point of action would be to give all recommended vaccines along with the school required vaccines. So for example, if an adolescent comes in for a Tdap, which is the required booster that a lot of kids get exclusion letters for in February, since it's the first vaccine that is due in a while. It's due in 7th grade compared to in kindergarten. So it's been a while for lots of them. But also recommending other vaccines that they might be due for, like HPV, meningococcal, or COVID, or just whatever they need and are recommended to get, along with these school required vaccines, will really help boost these rates. But that is all the information I had for you today. I'd be happy to take any questions or any ideas that you may have. And there is my contact information if you would like to connect.